Chapter 15, Lev. Lev is convinced his heart will explode in his chest. It will explode and he will die right here in the school hallway. Slipping out of the bathroom once the bell rang had been nerve-wracking. He had unlocked his stall door and had kept his hand on the handle for 10 minutes, waiting for the electronic buzz of the bell to mask the sound of it opening. Then he'd had to make it to the bathroom entrance without others hearing his brand new sneakers squeaking on the floor. Why do they call them sneakers if it's so hard to sneak in them? He couldn't open the squealing door and then walk out by himself. It would be too conspicuous. So he waited until a bathroom-bound girl did it for him. Since the bell had just rung, he only had to wait a few seconds. She pulled open the door and he pushed his way past her, hoping she didn't say anything that would give him away. If she commented about a boy being in the girl's bathroom, Connor and Risa would know. Next time, wear a dress, the girl had said to him as she hurried away, and her friend laughed. Was that enough to alert Connor and Risa of his escape? He hadn't turned back to find out. He just pressed forward. Now he's lost in the hallway of the huge high school, his heart threatening to detonate any second. A wild mob of kids hurrying to their next class surround him, bump him, disorient him. Most of the other kids are bigger than Lev, imposing, intimidating. This is how he'd always imagined high school, a dangerous place full of mystery and violent kids. He had never worried about it because he'd always known he wouldn't have to go. In fact, he only had to worry about getting partway through 8th grade. "Excuse me, can you tell me where the office is?" he asked one of the slower-moving students. The kid looks down at him as if Lev were from Mars. "How could you not know that?" And he just walks away, shaking his head. Another, kinder kid points him in the right direction. Lev knows that things must be put back on track. This is the best place to do it, a school. If there are any secret plans to kill Connor and Risa, it can't happen here with so many kids around. And if he does this right, it won't happen at all. If he does this right, all three of them will be safely on their way to the unwinding, as it should be, as it was ordained to be. The thought of it still frightens him, but these days, of not knowing what the next hour will bring, that is truly terrifying. Being torn from his purpose was the most unnerving thing that ever happened to Lev, but now he understands why God let it happen. It's a lesson. It's to show Lev what happens to children who shirk their destiny. They become lost in every possible way. He enters the school's main office and stands at the counter waiting to be noticed, but the secretary is too busy shuffling papers. "Excuse me." Finally, she looks up. "Can I help you, dear?" He clears his throat. "My name is Levi Calder, and I've been kidnapped by 2 runaway unwinds." The woman, who really wasn't paying attention before, suddenly focuses all her attention entirely on him. "What did you say?" "I was kidnapped. We were hiding in the bathroom, but I got away. They're still there. They've got a baby, too." The woman stands up and calls out, her voice shaky like she's looking at a ghost. She calls in the principal, and the principal calls in a security guard. 1 minute later, Lev is sitting in the nurse's office with the nurse doting on him like he's got a fever. "Don't you worry," she says. "Whatever happened to you, it's all over now." From here in the nurse's office, Lev has no way of knowing if they've captured Connor or Risa. He hopes that, if they have, they don't bring them here. The thought of having to face them makes him feel ashamed. Doing the right thing shouldn't make you ashamed. The police have been called. Everything's being taken care of, the nurse tells him. "You'll be going home soon." "I'm not going home," he tells her. The nurse looks at him strangely, and he decides not to go into it. "Never mind. Can I call my parents?" She looks at him incredulously. You mean no one's done that for you?" She looks at the school phone in the corner, then fumbles for her cell phone in her pocket instead. "You call and let them know you're okay. Talk as long as you like." She looks at him for a moment, then decides to give him some privacy, stepping out of the room. "I'll be right here if you need me." Lev begins to dial, but stops himself. It's not his parents he wants to talk to. He erases the numbers and keys in a different one, hesitates for a moment, and hits the send button. It's picked up on the second ring. "Hello? Pastor Dan?" There's only a split second of dead air, then recognition. "Dear God, Lev. Lev, is that you? Where are you?" "I don't know. Some school. Listen, you have to tell my parents to stop the police. I don't want them killed." "Lev, slow down. Are you all right?" "They kidnapped me, but they didn't hurt me, so I don't want them hurt. Tell my father to call off the police." "I don't know what you're talking about. We never told the police." Lev was not expecting to hear this. "You never what?" "Your parents were going to. They were going to make a whole big deal about it, but I convinced them not to. I convinced them that your being kidnapped was somehow God's will." Lev starts shaking his head like he can shake the thought away. But why would you do that?" Now Pastor Dan starts to sound desperate. "Listen, Lev, listen to me carefully. No one else knows you're gone. As far as anyone knows, you've been tithed, and people don't ask questions about children who are tithed. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" But I want to be tithed. I need to be. You have to call my parents and tell them you have to get me to harvest camp. Now Pastor Dan gets angry. Don't make me do that. Please don't make me do that. It's as if he's fighting a battle, but somehow it's not Lev he's battling. This is so far from Lev's image of Pastor Dan, he can't believe it's the same person he's known all these years. It's like an imposter has stolen the pastor's voice, but none of his convictions. Don't you see, Lev? You can save yourself. You can be anyone you want to be now. And all at once the truth comes to Lev. Pastor Dan wasn't telling him to run away from the kidnappers that day. He was telling Lev to run away from him, from his parents, from his tithing. After all of his sermons and lectures, after all that talk year after year about Lev's holy duty, it's all been a sham. Lev was born to be tithed, and the man who convinced him this was a glorious and honorable fate doesn't believe it. Lev, are you there? He's there, but he doesn't want to be. He doesn't want to answer this man who led him to a cliff only to turn away at the last minute. Now Lev's emotions spin like a wheel of fortune. One minute he's furious, the next relieved. One instant he's filled with terror so extreme he can smell it like acid in his nostrils. And the next, there's a spike of joy, like he used to feel when he swung away and heard the crack of his bat against the ball. He is that ball now, soaring away. His life has been like a ballpark, hasn't it? All lines, structure, and rules, never changing. Now he's been hit over the wall into unknown territory. Lev says, Pastor Dan, you're scaring me. Talk to me. Lev takes a slow, deep breath and then says, goodbye, sir. And then he hangs up without another word. Lev sees police cars arrive outside. Connor and Risa will be caught soon if they haven't been caught already. The nurse is no longer standing at the door. She's chiding the principal for how he's handling the situation. Why didn't you call the poor boy's parents? Why haven't you put the school on lockdown? Lev knows what he has to do. It's something wrong. It's something bad, but suddenly he doesn't care. He slips out of the office right behind the nurses and principal's backs and goes out into the hallway. It only takes a second to find what he's looking for. He reaches for the little box on the wall. I am lost in every possible way. Then, feeling the coldness of the steel against his fingertips, he pulls the fire alarm. Chapter 16, Teacher. The fire alarm goes off during the teacher's prep period, and she silently curses the powers that be for their awful timing. Perhaps, she thinks, if she can just stay in her empty classroom until the false alarm, and it's always a false alarm, is dealt with. But then, what kind of example would she be setting if students passing by looked in and saw her sitting there? She leaves the room, and the hallway's already filling with students, teachers trying their best to keep them organized. But this is high school. The organized lines of elementary school fire drills are long gone, having been replaced by the brazen, hormonal zigzags of kids whose bodies are too big for their own good. Then she sees something strange, something troubling. There are two policemen by the front office. They actually seem intimidated by the mob of kids flowing past them and out the front doors of the school. But why policemen? Why not firemen? And how could they have gotten here so quickly? They couldn't have. They must have been called before the alarm went off. But why? The last time there were policemen in the school, someone called in a clapper threat. The school was evacuated, and no one knew why until after the fact. Turns out there were no clappers. The school was never in danger of being blown up. It was just some kid pulling a practical joke. Still, clapper threats are always taken seriously because you never know when the threat might be real. Please, no pushing, she says to a student who bumps her elbow. I'm sure we'll all make it outside. Good thing she didn't bring her coffee. Sorry, Miss Steinberg. As she passes one of the science labs, she notices the door ajar. Just to be thorough, she peeks in to make sure there are no stragglers or kids trying to avoid the mass exodus. The stone-top tables are bare, and the chairs are all in place. No one's been in the lab this period. She reaches to pull the door closed, more out of habit than anything else, when she hears a sound that is wholly out of place in this room. A baby's cry. At first she thinks it might be coming from the student mother nursery, but the nursery's way down the hall. This cry definitely came from the lab. She hears the cry again, only this time it sounds oddly muffled and angrier. She knows that sound. Someone's trying to cover the baby's mouth to keep it from crying. These teen mothers always do that when they have their babies where they don't belong. They never seem to realize it only makes the baby cry louder. Party's over, she calls out. Come on, you and your baby have to leave with everyone else. But they don't come out. There's that muffled cry again, followed by some intense whispering that she can't quite make out. Annoyed, she steps into the lab and storms down the center aisle, looking left and right until she finds them crouched behind one of the lab tables. It's not just a girl and a baby. There's a boy, too. There's a look of desperation about them. The boy looks as though he might bolt, but the girl grabs his arm firmly with her free hand and keeps him in place. The baby wails. The teacher might not know every name in the school, but she's fairly certain she knows every face, and she certainly knows all the student mothers. This isn't one of them, and the boy is completely unfamiliar too. The girl looks at her, eyes pleading, too frightened to speak. She just shakes her head. It's the boy who speaks. If you turn us in, we'll die. At the thought, the girl holds the baby closer to her. It cries lessen, but they don't go away entirely. Clearly, these are the ones the police are looking for reasons she can only guess at. Please, says the boy. Please what, the teacher thinks. Please break the law? Please put myself and the school at risk? But no, that's not it at all. What he's really saying is, please be a human being. With a life so full of rules and regimens, it's easy to forget that's what they are. She knows, she sees how often compassion takes a back seat to expediency. Then a voice from behind her, Hannah? She turns to see another teacher looking in from the door. He's a bit disheveled, having fought the raging rapids of kids still funneling out of the school. He obviously hears the baby's cries. How could he not? Is everything all right, he asks. Yeah, says Hannah, with more calm in her voice than she actually feels. I'm taking care of it. The other teacher nods and leaves, probably glad not to share the burden of whatever this crying baby situation is. Hannah now knows what the situation is, however, at least she suspects. Kids only have this kind of desperation in their eyes when they're going to be unwound. She holds out her hand to the frightened kids. Come with me. The kids are hesitant, so she says, if they're looking for you, they'll find you once the building is empty. You can't expect to hide here. If you want to get out, you'll have to leave with everyone else. Come on, I'll help you. Finally, they rise from behind the lab table, and she breathes a sigh of relief. She can tell they still don't trust her, but then, why should they? Unwinds exist in the constant shadow of betrayal. Well, they don't need to trust her now. They just need to go with her, and in this case, necessity is the mother of compliance, and that's just fine. Don't tell me your names, she says to them. Don't tell me anything. So if they question me afterward, I won't be lying when I say I don't know. There are still crowds of kids pushing past in the hall, leading toward the next exit. She steps out of the room, making sure the 2 kids and their baby are right behind her. She will help them. Whoever they are, she will do her best to get them to safety. What kind of example would she be setting if she didn't? Chapter 17, Risa. Police down the hall, police at the exits. Risa knows this is Lev's doing. He didn't just run away, he turned them in. This teacher says she's helping them, but what if she's not? What if she's just leading them to the police? Don't think about that now. Keep your eyes on the baby. Policemen know panic when they see it. But if her eyes are turned to the baby, her panic might be read as concern for the baby's tears. If I ever see Lev again, says Connor, I'll tear him to pieces. Shh, says the teacher, leading them along with the crowd to the exit. Risa can't blame Connor for his anger. She blames herself for not seeing through Lev's sham. How could she have been so naive to think he was truly on their side? We should have let that little creep be unwound, grumbles Connor. Shut up, says Risa. Let's just get out of this. As they near the door, another policeman comes into view, standing just outside. Give me the baby, the teacher orders, and Risa does as she's told. She doesn't yet realize why the woman asked for the baby, but it doesn't matter. It's wonderful to have someone leading the way who seems to know what they're doing. Perhaps this woman isn't the enemy after all. Perhaps she truly will get them through this. Let me go ahead, says the teacher. If you 2 will separate and just walk out with the rest. Without the baby to look at, Risa knows she can't hide the panic in her eyes, but suddenly she realizes that it might not matter. And now she understands why the woman took the baby. Yes, Lev turned them in, but if they're lucky, these local policemen only have a description of them to go by. A scruffy-haired boy, a dark-haired girl with a baby. Take away the baby, and that could be half the kids in this school. The teacher, Hannah, passes the policeman a few yards ahead of them, and he gives her only a momentary glance. But then he looks toward Risa, and his eyes lock on her. Risa knows she's just given herself away. Should she turn back and race into the school? Where's Connor now? Is he behind her, in front of her? She has no idea. She's completely alone. And then salvation arrives in the most unlikely form. Hi, Dee Dee. It's Alexis, the talkative girl from the school bus. She comes up beside her with Chaz gnawing on her shoulder. People pull the alarms all the time, she says. Well, at least I got out of math. Suddenly, the policeman's eyes shift to Alexis. Stop right there, miss. Alexis looks stunned. Who, me? Step aside. We'd like to ask you a few questions. Risa walks right past, holding her breath for fear that her gasp of relief might draw the officer's attention again. Risa no longer fits the profile of what they're looking for, but Alexis does. Risa doesn't even look back. She just continues down the steps to the street. In a few moments, Connor catches up with her. I saw what happened back there. Your friend may have just saved your life. I'll have to thank her later. Up ahead, Hannah reaches into her pocket with her free hand and pulls out her car keys. then turns left toward the faculty parking lot. It's all going to be okay, Risa thinks. She's going to get us out of here. Risa might just start believing in miracles and angels, and then she hears a familiar voice behind her. Wait, stop. She turns to see Lev. He's spotted them, and although he's far away, he's quickly working his way through the crowd toward them. Risa, Connor, wait. It wasn't enough just to turn them in. Now he's leading the cops directly to them, and he's not the only one. Alexis still stands with the policeman at the school's side entrance. From where she stands, she can easily see Risa, and she points Risa out to the cop. The cop instantly pulls out his radio to inform the other officers. Connor, we're in trouble. I know, I see it too. Wait, screams Lev, still far away but getting closer. Risa looks for Hannah, but she's vanished into the crowd of kids in the parking lot. Connor looks to Risa, fear overwhelming the fury in his eyes. Run. This time, Risa doesn't hesitate. She runs with him, breaking toward the street, just as a fire truck bursts onto the scene, siren blaring. The truck stops right in their path. There's nowhere to run. The fire alarm had mercifully been pulled at the perfect time and had gotten them this far, but the commotion's fading. Kids are milling instead of moving, and cops in every direction zero in on the two of them. What they need is a fresh commotion, something even worse than a fire alarm. The answer comes before Risa can even formulate the entire idea in her mind. She speaks without even knowing what she's about to say. Start clapping. What? Start clapping. Trust me. A single nod from Connor makes it clear he gets it, and he begins bringing his hands together, slowly at first, then more and more quickly. She does the same, both of them applauding as if they were at a concert cheering for their favorite band. Beside them, a student drops his backpack and stares at them in utter horror. Clappers, he screams. In an instant, the word is out. Clappers, clappers, clappers. It echoes in the kids around them. In an instant, it reaches critical mass, and the entire crowd is in a full-blown panic. Clappers, everyone screams, and the crowd becomes a stampede. Kids bolt, but no one's sure where to go. All they know is they must get away from the school as quickly as possible. Risa and Connor continue to clap, their hands red from the force of their duet of applause. With the mob racing in blind terror, the cops can't get to them. Lev is vanished, trampled by the panicked mob, and everything is made worse by the fire sign, which blares like it's sounding out the end of the world. They stop clapping and join the stampede, becoming a part of the running crowd. That's when someone comes up beside them. It's Hannah. Her plans of driving them off campus are gone, so she quickly hands Risa the baby. There's an antique shop on Fleming Street, she tells them. Ask for Sonia. She can help you. We're not clappers, is all Risa can think to say. I know you're not. Good luck. There's no time to thank her. In a moment, the wild crowd pulls them apart, taking Hannah in a different direction. Risa stumbles and realizes they're in the middle of the street. Traffic has come to a halt as hundreds of kids race in a mad frenzy to escape the terrorists, whoever they are. The baby in Risa's arm bawls, but its cries are nothing compared to the screams of the mob. In a moment, they're across the street and gone with the crowd. Chapter 18, Lev. This is the meaning of alone. Lev called her beneath the trampling feet of a stampeding crowd. Risa, Connor, help. He should have never called out their names, but it's too late to change that now. They ran from him when he called. They didn't wait. They ran. They hate him. They know what he did. Now hundreds of feet race over Lev like he's not there. His hand is stomped on, a boost comes down on his chest, and a kid springboards off of him to get greater speed. Clappers. They're all screaming about clappers just because he pulled the stupid alarm. He has to catch up with Risa and Connor. He has to explain, to tell them he's sorry and that he was wrong to turn them in and that he had pulled the alarm to help them escape. He has to make them understand. They're his only friends now. They were, but not anymore. He's ruined everything. Finally, the stampede thins out enough for Lev to pick himself up. A knee of his jeans is torn. He tastes blood. He must have bitten his tongue. He tries to assess the situation. Most of the mob is off campus, in the streets and beyond, disappearing down the side streets. Only stragglers left. Don't just stand there, says a kid hurrying past. There are clappers on the roof. No, says another kid. I heard they're in the cafeteria. All around Lev, the bewildered cops pace with a false determination in their stride as if they know exactly where to go, only to turn around and pace with the same determination in the other direction. Connor and Risa have left him. He realizes that if he doesn't leave now with the rest of the stragglers, he'll draw attention of the police. He runs away, feeling more helpless than a storked baby. He doesn't know who to blame for this. Pastor Dan for cutting him loose? Himself for betraying the only two kids willing to help him? Or should he blame God for allowing his life to reach this bitter moment? You can be anyone you want to be now, Pastor Dan had said. But right now, Lev feels like no one. This is the true meaning of alone. Levi Jedediah Calder, suddenly realizing he no longer exists. Chapter 19, Connor. The antique shop is in the oldest part of town. Trees arc over the street, their branches cut into unnatural angular patterns by the profiles of passing trucks. The street is full of yellow and brown leaves, but enough diehards still cling to the branches to make a shady canopy. The baby is inconsolable, and Connor wants to complain to Risa about it, but he knows he can't. If it hadn't been for him, the baby wouldn't even be part of the equation. There aren't all that many people in the street, just enough, mostly kids from the high school knocking around, probably spreading more rumors about clappers trying to detonate themselves. I hear they're anarchists. I hear it's some weird religion. I hear they do it just to do it. The threat of clappers is so effective because no one knows what they really stand for. That was smart back there, Connor tells Risa as they approach the antique shop, pretending to be clappers. I mean, I would have never thought of that. You thought quick enough to take out that juvie cop the other day with his own trank gun. Connor grins. I go by instinct, you go by brains. I guess we make a pretty decent team. Yeah, and we're a bit less dysfunctional without Lev. At the mention of Lev, Connor feels a spike of anger. He rubs his sore arm where Lev bit him, but what Lev did today was much more painful than that. Forget about him. He's history. We got away, and so his squealing doesn't matter. Now he'll get unwound just like he wants, and we won't have to deal with him again. And yet the thought of it brings Connor a pang of regret. He had risked his life for Lev. He tried to save him, but it failed. Maybe if Connor were better with words, he could have said something that would truly won him over, but who is he kidding? Lev was a tithe from the moment he was born. You don't undo 13 years of brainwashing in just 2 days. The antique shop is old. White paint peels from the front door. Connor pushes open the door, bells hanging high on the door jingle, low-tech intruder alert. There's one customer, a sour-faced man in a tweed coat. He looks up at them, disinterested and maybe disgusted by the baby, because he wanders deeper into the recesses of the cluttered store to get away. The shop has things from perhaps every point in American history. A display of iPods and other little gadgets from his grandfather's time cover an old chrome-rimmed dinner table. An old movie plays on an antique plasma screen TV. The movie shows a crazy version of the future that never came, with flying cars and a white-haired scientist. Can I help you? An old woman as hunched as a question mark comes out from behind the cash register. She walks with a cane, but she seems pretty sure-footed in spite of it. Risa bounces the baby to get its volume down. We're looking for Sonia. You found her. What do you want? We need some help, Risa says. Yeah, Connor chimes in. Someone told us to come here. The old woman looks at them suspiciously. Does this have something to do with that fiasco over at the high school? Are you clappers? Do we look like clappers to you, says Connor. The woman narrows her eyes at him. Nobody looks like a clapper. Connor narrows his gaze to match her and then goes over to the wall. He holds up his hand and jabs it forward with the full might, punching the wall hard enough to bruise his knuckles. A little painting of a fruit bowl falls off the wall. Connor catches it before it hits the ground and sets it on the counter. See, he says, my blood isn't explosive. If I were a clapper, this whole shop would be gone. The old woman stares at him. It's a hard gaze for Connor to hold. There's some sort of fire in those weary eyes, but Connor doesn't look away. See this hunch, she asks? I got it from sticking my neck out for people like you. Connor still won't break his gaze. Guess we came to the wrong place then. Glancing at Risa, he says, let's get out of here. He turns to leave, and the old woman swings her cane sharply and painfully across his shins. Not so fast. It just so happens that Hannah called me, and I knew you were coming. Risa, still bouncing the baby, lets out a frustrated breath. You could have told us when we came in. Well, what fun would that be? By now, the sour-faced customer has made his way closer again, picking up item after item, his expression showing instant disapproval of everything in the shop. I have some lovely infant items in the back room, she tells them loud enough for the customer to hear. Why don't you go back there and wait for me? Then she whispers, and for God's sake, feed that baby. The back room is through a doorway covered by what looks like an old shower curtain. If the front room was cluttered, this place is a disaster area. Things like broken picture frames and rusty bird cages are piled around, all the items that weren't good enough to be displayed out front. The junk of the junk. And you're telling me this old woman's going to help us, says Connor? It looks like she can't even help herself. Hannah said she would, and I believe her. How could you be raised in a state home and still trust people? Risa gives him a dirty look and says, hold this. She puts the baby in Connor's arms. It's the first time she's given it to him. It feels much lighter than he expected. Something so loud and demanding ought to be heavier. The baby's cries have weakened now. It's just about exhausted itself. There's nothing keeping them tied to this baby anymore. They could stork it again first thing in the morning, and yet the thought of it makes Connor uncomfortable. They don't know this baby anything. It's theirs by stupidity, not biology. He doesn't want it, but he can't stand the thought of someone getting the baby who wants it even less than he does. His frustration begins to ferment into anger. It's the same kind of anger that always got him into trouble back home. It would cloud his judgment, making him lash out, getting into fights, cursing out teachers, or riding his skateboard wildly through a busy intersection. "Why do you have to get wound so tight?" his father once asked, exasperated, and Connor had snapped back, "Maybe someone ought to unwind me." At the time, he thought he was just being funny. Risa opens a refrigerator, which is as cluttered as the rest of the back room. She pulls out a container of milk and then, finding a bowl, she pours in the milk. "It's not a cat," Connor says. "It won't lick milk out of a bowl." "I know what I'm doing." Connor watches as she rummages in the drawers until she finds a clean spoon. Then she takes the baby from him. Sitting down, she cradles the baby a bit more skillfully than Connor, and then she dips the spoon into the milk and spills the spoonful into the baby's mouth. The baby begins to gag on the milk, coughing and sputtering, but then Risa puts her index finger into its mouth. It sucks on her finger and closes its eyes, satisfied. In a few moments, she crooks her finger enough to leave a little space for her to spill in another spoonful of milk and lets the baby suck on her finger again. "Wow, that's impressive," says Connor. "Sometimes I got to take care of babies at Stay-Ho. You learned a few tricks. I just hope this one's not lactose intolerant." With the baby quieted, it's as if the day's tension has suddenly been released. Connor's eyelids grow heavy, but he won't allow himself to fall asleep. They're not safe yet. They may never be, and he can't let his guard down now. Still, his mind begins to drift off. He wonders if his parents are still looking for him or if it's just the police now. He thinks about Ariana. What would have happened to them if she had come along with him as she promised? They would have been caught on the first night. That's what would have happened. Ariana wasn't street smart like Risa. She wasn't resourceful. Thoughts of Ariana bring a wave of sadness and longing, but it's not as powerful a feeling as Connor thought it would be. How soon until she forgets him? How soon until everyone forgets him? Not long. That's what happens with unwinds. Connor had known other kids at school who disappeared over the past couple of years. One day, they just didn't turn up. Teachers would say they were gone or no longer enrolled. Those were just code words, though. Everyone knew what they meant. The kids who knew them would talk about how terrible it was and gripe about it for a day or two, and then it became old news. Unwinds didn't go out with a bang. They didn't even go out with a whimper. They went out with the silence of a candle flame pinched between two fingers.